Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hi, and welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla.
I'm Chelle.
And in today's episode, we've invited the artist and creative force behind the new deck, Tarot of the Unexplained, Davezilla, to join us. Dave is a modern-day Renaissance mage who literally walks the liminal between the magical and mundane worlds. He's a corporate shaman who's worked in advertising and illustration most of his life. He's also been reading tarot since 1979, has been initiated into various traditions from Gardnerian to Santero to Discordian and more as a true seeker of knowledge. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And actually, before we get into your fantastic new deck, Tarot of the Unexplained, that's coming out on August 5th from Red Wheel Wiser Publications, Chelle has been on pins and needles waiting for this deck, and she has a little story for you, Dave.
So we have a partnership with Red Wheel Wiser, and we get the catalogs in advance. So I'm looking at these catalogs last fall. Okay, we're talking September, October
of 2023.
Of 2023. And I see a deck listed there that's about cryptids. Now, in our previous podcast that we did a few years back, the Stoned Witches Hour, I am cryptid girl. I love all cryptids. If I could go and find every single one, I would. So all I wanted in life was a tarot deck that had something to do with cryptids in it. I find this and it says it will be released, and I think it said April. And I'm like, all right, it's September. I can wait till April. And see, I'm a Gemini. I have no patience. So September to April was really hard for me. So then it gets to be about February, March. And I was like, Layla, we're getting ready to put in an order from Red Wheel Wiser. You need to get me this deck. And
I've known. This has been at the top of her list. She has been waiting. Every time I put in an order, she's like, Layla, can we get that deck? I know it says April, but can we get it? I'm like, no, just wait.
So February, March comes along and she's like, sorry, Chelle, it says August. I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, I'm going to go find the creator.
She flipped a chair.
I did. I'm going to find the creator of this deck and somehow get my hands on it before August. Well, granted, it was July, but I got my hands on the deck. So I've literally waited 10 months for this deck.
We've wanted this deck for quite a while because we are very much into paranormal stories, the Fortean phenomenon, all of that. And so we would love to talk about some of this with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also I couldn't help the deck being delayed. That wasn't on me. I was told the same thing. I was told, oh, this can be our spring highlight is the deck. I'm like, great. And then it was like, spring came around. They're like, it's coming out in August. I'm like, oh, okay.
I'll be honest with you. I was ready to come hunt you down.
Well, you could have gotten from me the original deck. Because at first during COVID was when I designed it. And I printed 150 decks on my own dime. And I didn't spring for the boxes. I just did like velvet bags. I gave them really cheap with the decks. Like it was like 25 cents each or something for a velvet bag. And I'm like, oh, that's worth it. So I ordered 150 of those. I sold 100 of them, and the other 50 I mostly gave to friends or people that were in the deck. And I still have some laying around. But yeah, if you had asked, I would gladly have sent you one.
Oh, don't say that.
This deck is slightly different. I'll send you one now because you have to see the difference because there's 6 cards that are different.
Really?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Mainly because I couldn't get some model releases in time.
Okay.
And I had one flat out refusal. The Skeptic of Ghosts was originally James Randi, and his family thought I was making fun of him. His estate, so they outright refused. But some of the other ones were just more like Avi Loman. We just couldn't get a hold of him in time. He was a UFO expert. James Meldrum, who's a Bigfoot expert, said, absolutely you can, but that's all he wrote in the email, and he didn't sign the PDF, so they were like, we can't use it. I'm like, oh,
Oh no.
Close
yeah.
enough.
And then one of my friends, John, I don't know if you guys know John Tenney. He's been on lots of the ghost hunting shows, and he does research for almost every paranormal show. But he happens to be a neighbor of mine, and
Oh.
we did our first ghost hunting together like 20 years ago. And he was going to be the fool card, the ghost stalker, and I had him on the card. And then he was on in England somewhere, inaccessible, on some ghost tour for like a month, and I couldn't get his signature back in time. So he did send it, but it didn't make it in time for the printer. They were holding as long as they could, so his card had to be replaced too.
Okay, so that actually brings up two questions that I have for you.
Sure.
I do love the art. It's very vibrant. I like the amount of detail that you put into each card.
Thanks.
But in particular, what I very much like are the court cards.
Mhm.
I like how you've reimagined them as the fan, the skeptic, the hunter, and the
Advocate and the skeptic. Yeah.
yes, the
But
advocate.
those energies still kind of matched what the real court cards are.
They do, but I love the characters. I love the
Thanks.
realism and are these based on real people, all of
They
them,
are.
or just
The
okay?
skeptic of portals is my wife. The skeptic of knockers is my best friend Dave. He and I have parallel lives, and we were born 3 days apart.
Oh wow.
The skeptic of saucers is Patrick from Gasoline Alley. He's the head bartender there, and it's a notorious. If you come to Detroit, everybody knows about Gasoline Alley. It's this hidden, notorious dive bar,
Okay.
and he is a hilarious guy. So he was great for this.
Their personalities absolutely come through in the energies of these
Yeah.
cards. And that is one of the things that I very, very much love about this deck.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried really hard on that.
I kind of feel it a little more of an oracle deck rather than a tarot deck because of a lot of the differences, but I love it for that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I am just absolutely in love with the people in this deck because they are so vibrant and so alive, and the energies of them, the personalities very much jump out and make the cards that much richer and deeper in detail.
Now, I have a question for you, Dave. Now, you've picked a set of cryptids. What made you pick those particular cryptids to use in the deck? Because there's
Hundreds.
Yeah.
What made you
I
pick
agonized
this
over
set?
that. I agonized over it. Like, some of them I couldn't figure out. Like, I really want, my favorite cryptid of all is the Totzel worm from
Ooh.
Germany, and I could not find a place to put that.
I was hoping for the Wampus cat.
Oh, so I have been asked by several people who have the deck, will you make an extension pack with more cryptids and more ghosts? And I was like, well, I'll talk to Wiser. There's no reason I couldn't. So
Please do.
There may be more coming.
I'm going to put my vote in for that.
I'm voting.
Because one of the workshops that I teach is on Frankenstein or magpie decks.
Mhm.
And the Alleyman Tarot is a very popular Kickstarter type deck. And it's based on the idea of adding more or taking away from the deck
Yes.
until you make a very personal deck. I would love to see a companion oracle deck or something that could be mixed in or added to this deck. That would be very cool, especially if you could add more ghosts,
More cryptids,
more ladies in white, which are my favorite.
Yeah, I thought about. I really wanted. There was a whole bunch of lady in whites I wanted.
Oh,
to
so
do.
many.
I could almost do an entire deck of them.
Yes, a whole
Just
suit.
so
You could do a whole suit of ladies in white.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had to throw in a Detroit cryptid, which was the Nine Rouge, which is our local devil. The Nine Rouge has been known in Detroit since the 1700s, when Cadillac first discovered the area and conquered it. We used to be a French colony, and he was told by a fortune teller that he was going to run into an imp, and he was to ignore it and leave it alone. It was a local spirit, and she was basically describing like genius loci and telling them, this is a land spirit, leave it the hell alone.
Good advice, usually.
He ignored her. He sawed along the Detroit River and beat it with his cane and said, "Be gone, you imp."
Oh no.
Everything fell apart in his life. He ended up losing his military rank, his company collapsed, he lost his fortune, and he ended up in jail back in England. So
that's what happens when you fuck with land spirits. You mess with the
mess with
genus
them.
loci.
Yeah, and now we have there's a giant parade every year. If you look up Nine Rouge Detroit, you will see this parade for this every year, where they either half the people are trying to chase it out, and half the people are like, no, keep the Nine Rouge.
Yeah, there's a lot of them like that, depending on the cryptid and the location. A lot of them become a little bit like anti-heroes, maybe.
Yes. Same thing with the Hodag. The Hodag in Wisconsin is a big festival too.
The Mothman, and I think you had that with
Love
the
Mothman.
bridge.
Silver Bridge, yeah.
Yes, because that was the Mothman. Didn't the Mothman appear and like foretold that?
In Point Pleasant, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Oh yeah, Pennsylvania is rife with cryptids. We have them around every corner here.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, like have you heard of the squonk?
Yes. The first time I heard of it actually was in the early 70s from that Genesis song.
Okay, hold on.
Genesis has an entire song about the squonk legend.
Are you kidding me?
It's in the Trick of the Tail album. It's actually one of their bigger hits, even though people for their old stuff.
I feel like I failed as a Pennsylvanian and a Gen Xer. I feel terrible
Oh
now.
my God, you'll love it. It's all about how it cries and disappears and everything. And
Yeah.
it's cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that's the squonk. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit to something else that you said just a little bit ago, and you talked about going on ghost hunts. Now,
Yes.
I understand that you have seen quite a few phenomena, maybe not a cryptid, but you have experienced quite a few different phenomena in your life.
Yeah.
And could you tell us about any time you've seen a ghost or gone on a ghost hunt?
Yeah. The first ghost hunt I went on was like I said with John Tenney. And we got covered by the Detroit Free Press for some reason. They had a whole page about it. Back then there wasn't a whole lot of equipment, so we had a night vision scope, a tape recorder, and I mean the old fashioned,
With an actual like cassette tape and buttons?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Are you talking like 80s-ish?
What's that?
Are you talking like the 80s-ish? Early
Yes.
90s?
Yeah, late 80s. So, handheld tape recorder with all the buttons. And then we had we had something up for magnetic detection. It wasn't like an EMF reader like they have now, but now there's so many apps and things that can test. Back then there wasn't that much, but our city, Royal Oak, is like goes back to the early 1800s. So there's a lot of very, very old graves out here. And so we were walking around in there, and that night we didn't happen to see anything, and I think it's because we were being followed by a whole crew of media people from the Free Press.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that'll
that
do
can
it.
change a vibe for sure.
Yeah, but my first encounter actually with something was when I was in college. I had a friend, and she and I used to like go around in like abandoned places. Down at the end of our city there used to be an old abandoned rest home called Manor Haven, which is an evil name already.
That just sounds creepy and haunted.
Yeah, and we went in this place and everything had been left from the 60s and not changed. Like there was still clothes folded on the edges of the beds.
Oh, wow.
The whole place, and just covered with dust. And the first thing that happened was we opened up, Carrie walked over and she opened up the refrigerator in this looked like a kitchen, and all these bags of dried blood fell out that were for transfusions.
Oh no.
And they were just covered in maggots. We were like,
I think the
That
maggots
scared us.
would have freaked me out, honestly.
yeah, it
more than
wasn't a
anything
good
else.
start. And this is on a Saturday morning. Well, then we saw this attic, and there was like a stairwell going up to the attic. We're like, oh, there's got to be something cool up there. So we walk all the way to the top, and then we hear a noise behind us. We both look around, and there's this dark shadow at the bottom of the stairs, and the door slams shut. And we went running back down, and we were locked in. And we were like,
no.
crap. And Carrie goes, whatever, let's just go look around the attic while we're here. Maybe it'll open up later, or we can find a window.
That's like everything that you were there for.
Yeah, or like, well, maybe we'll find a window or something we can get out. I'm like, okay. So we go up there, and then you know how back then they used to have rafters with all the insulation, but they never really
Oh, with
covered
no floor. Yeah.
it. So, but the floor was covered with clothes. And we were wondering if the staff had been like stealing clothes from the people who stayed there and just throwing it up there, or if it was just leftover from people who may have passed on and that's just where they threw it all. But you couldn't see the floor at all. So she was walking and she thought she was on the steps, and she went right through the roof and got like caught up to her shoulder. And as soon as I pulled her out, the door opened up at the base
Oh, wow.
to the stairs. We were like,
So weird.
yeah, it was real weird.
See, now I would think between seeing the black figure, the door slamming and locking and falling through the floor, I'd be like, should we maybe at least go down a level?
Well, we kind of left after that.
Yeah.
So we were like, I think we're done here.
I think we're done. Yeah.
Yeah, and another one I saw that I did not like at all was one night I used to live in a flat where there was an upper and lower flat, and I was dating a witch, and downstairs was like some friends of ours or a couple, and they were both witches. And we woke up, the two of us woke up, and my girlfriend at the time, she like pounded me. She goes, "What is that?" And up in the corner was this black pulsating mass, and it didn't seem to have any shape to it. It was like almost like smoke that was stuck in the corner.
Almost like
And
cloud-like.
very, but you couldn't see through it. And we turned the light on, and it was still there. So we grabbed some salt and threw at it, and it just made it go away. But the next morning, the downstairs neighbors met us for coffee and said, "Oh my God, we couldn't sleep. There was this black thing that showed up in our room." And I'm like, "Oh my God, we did too."
But we were smart enough to throw salt at it.
They did too. We don't know if we done it to each other or if we both had one and it disappeared, but it was the same time, roughly. We figured. I've never seen that thing again, and I don't want to. It was really awful.
Now, what is your experience with seeing portals? Because I've heard that you've seen portals.
Yeah, there's some portals that are like when you're mainly in a forest, you can tell the trees are kind of bent in a way that's
Bent, not right.
And and you can get that feeling where there's some kind of ancestral spirit going.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Come
And you know
to
that's
me.
a land spirit that's like, "I'll talk to you."
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Exactly. And I'm all for those. So I will follow them. But I've never had anything where I went through those and ended up like in another place or another time or anything like that, like Charles Fort has reported people having done. But I've definitely had some good experiences with meeting land spirits that way.
It almost reminds me of like going in a fairy circle or going down a fairy path. You're going
100%.
down it and you're not sure you're staying in this reality. So that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I know if you go in those things too, you can just sit down and close your eyes and, and start going like a meditative journey through and see what they're going to
Yes.
do. And usually it's a lot easier to talk to them that way than just hanging out and waiting for them to show up.
And a lot of those places, like particularly like you were talking about genus loci and land spirits, when you go into the woods or you go to some of these sacred places or, to a river or something, there's sometimes you can just feel these places energetically. As you're walking along, you'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
this feels like this has a really, really nice vibe. This has a really nice feeling to it. I'm going to sit here and maybe meditate with this space for a little while. Those I think are more common than people think.
Right. And then there's also the reverse. There's times when you feel those when you're like, they definitely do not want humans here
Right. Yeah, they're like,
at
get
all.
out.
That was kind of my last experience. The last time I was in Layla's backyard.
Oh, really?
She led me down a path where she's creating like a ritual circle. And we went down there late-ish at night, and it really felt like we were infiltrating a party that we were not invited to. And it
Oh,
was like we were being stared at, like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, it was literally like we walked in on a dinner party that we weren't invited at. And it was weird because it was definitely like it wasn't a bad feeling, but it was a "we don't want you here" feeling.
yeah, right. Most of the time it's not antagonistic. It's just kind of like, this isn't your place.
Kind of like you're
Right.
invading my space, kind of
Right.
thing.
Who invited you? Exactly. Can I see the invitation? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question for Chelle, you, for Davezilla. As magic users, as people who feel energy and work with energy, if you encountered a place like that, say you're on vacation and you go to an Airbnb in a cool place and you walk into this house and the vibe is get out. What do you do? Like what do you reach for? Like what would you do as someone who's an energetic magic
Yeah.
worker type person?
Well, one thing I always bring with me is I'll never not have it on me.
He's reaching in his
Yeah, I was
pocket.
gonna say
Yeah,
he's got it on
literally.
right now.
You know what El Igual looks like in Santeria, the little clay head with the face.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can also get a stone that's fed to him, and it's a like a extension of him that you can bring with you. And I feel 100 times safer because he's the Orisha of travel, and he's kind of like Mercury. He's like travel and obstacles and trickster and stuff. So I bring him with me, but also I did have that happen. There's a hotel I had to stay at for work one time that was notoriously haunted in San Francisco, and they gave me the haunted room, of course. I'm like, well, of course.
They
And
must have sensed something about you and put you in that
yeah,
room.
and I took a really creepy picture that I think I still have it. I'm almost positive I do. I just don't know where, but I know I have it. Facing the window, looking back at me, and I'm up on several floors up.
Oh wow.
But it was kind of disturbing. But yeah, that those I usually just like sometimes I'll draw a pentacle on the pillow and on the door with my finger and just and talk to all the go and be like the shit out of here.
I'm an overpacker. Layla and I went on a road trip a few months back. I just pack a full-on altar. I just bring the whole shit with me. I actually do have a separate travel altar.
Mhm.
And when I am going and staying somewhere, that is part of my packing list.
Yeah, a lot of times I wear my leg gates to the beads that you see because each of those is fed to a different Orisha, and those are pretty potent. But sometimes I don't like carrying them because they're heavy and they're sweaty when you wear them. And a lot of times I don't like people touching them. And always when you travel, the TSA wants to pick them up. Oh, these are pretty.
People are very handsy when it comes
Yeah,
to ritual stuff. People get all of a sudden real handsy.
especially with
Yeah.
bright colored things. Yeah.
Yeah. But Davezilla literally pulled out of his pocket right here and now his protection talisman.
Not an Orisha, yeah.
Having something on you that's charged for protection is great. You can use incense smoke, you can use music, all sorts of things to create a temporary safe space for you, even if you're not going to be there long enough to make friends or at least get along with the genus loci or with the energies of that place. There's temporary protections that you can
Sigils,
do.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got the pinnacle idea from a Hindu friend of mine who said, "Oh, I draw the Om on my pillow before I go to bed if I'm having bad dreams." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And I tried it; it does work.
You can even get those fancy pillow sprays and do it. Be all cute like that
Yeah,
if you wanted to. Yep. I love that. I'm a sigil person. I like sigils.
love sigils.
Yes, I know you are a Discordian. You're also chaos magic.
Yeah,
I'm into a little bit of that. But I love sigils and drawing sigils on your pillows, on your blankets, on your windows, on your
Door
doors. Or
casings.
yeah,
Yeah.
fabulous
my
magic right there.
signature in my artwork is Dave, but it's also a pinnacle. But I made a sigil out of my name. So
I've seen your art on Instagram and other social media. You have your art up there. I just recently saw an Aquarius witch. I guess you'd done a little while back that
no,
I
I didn't work on that. I was posting that just because I was so amazed by that book. Ivo Dominguez wrote that book, and I was like, "That's so good."
Oh no, it was a picture.
Oh, the picture. Oh, yeah, I did do a whole series of witches by the zodiac signs. Yes.
No, the picture that you had done, not the book that I am actually desperately waiting to get my little Aquarian hands on, but no, it was an art piece that you had done.
Yes, I did do this year 42 paintings of witches this year, and each one was like Storm Witch or Swamp Witch or whatever, and most of them were done in sort of a early Art Nouveau sort of style, which I like working in a lot.
That's something that I really love about this deck because so often nowadays, not that there's anything wrong with this, but you'll see a famous author or a famous witch or magic user of some type work with an artist to create a deck, which is fabulous. We get beautiful works of art, really creative, interesting things. But I love that this is one person. This is you. You did the art here.
Mhm.
You came up with the meanings for the cards. This is all your input from start to finish, which gives it a whole different feel than something that's created by multiple people. Not that one is better than the other. I just think it's different, and I enjoy the seamlessness between the.
Actually, that was one thing that stood out to me. I was like, wow, sweet, someone who did all of it.
Yep.
All of it. And again, not knocking art,
Oh, no,
there's
I get
artists and
it.
but
Yeah,
it's rare to see someone who's done all of it, and that stuck out to me with this deck. And by the way, since we're speaking about that, kudos on the book because I love that you actually. I have a card I'm holding for down the road in a minute. I love the fact that you actually have colored pictures of each card in the book. The little pamphlet books are great, but this is like a comprehensive book in pamphlet size. And I love that.
Yeah, it was really I worked really hard with Weiser's art director, Catherine, to make sure I had enough room to get in like the correspondences, the description of the card, the meaning of the card, and a meditation if possible. And also whatever phenomenon would be either experience that you want to pull that card for or that may be caused by that card. Because I did notice that this card seemed to bring up a lot of unusual energies too. It's a weird deck.
It is, and I love that you reimagined each of the suits. You went with the knocking sticks and ghosts, portals, and flying saucers instead of wands, swords, cups, and pentacles.
Yeah, I tried to stick with the elements, but not the same suits.
Yeah, you definitely kept the feeling of it, although I'm gonna have to say I am not a fan of
Say it, Layla. Say it. I know what you're
Oh,
going to say.
no, you think you know what I'm going to say. You think I'm going to talk about the gilding, but we'll get into that in a minute. But no, I do feel that wands are air rather than fire, and swords are fire. Half of us, I think, out here believe that way. But I like how you reimagined all of the suits for this deck. In the Tarot of the Unexplained, the suits are a little bit different. You have made the suits, swords are ghosts, pentacles are flying saucers, portals are cups, and wands become the Sasquatch knocking sticks. And if I'm correct with the knocking sticks, that's the same Sasquatch going through a long mural. Is that right?
It is correct. She's going through a whole story.
Now, did you paint that all as one piece, or?
Yeah, it's a 9-foot illustrator board that's
Wow.
just going. Yeah, it was really hard to break that apart and make it work, but I did get it to work.
There's stories within stories here in your suits beyond just what the regular tarot meanings are. And now you have a long history of tarot, not just of art. You've been reading cards since like 1979.
Yep.
You are a tarot reader.
This wasn't just something I decided to do. Yeah.
No, you have a solid background. I do love the different stories that are told, like the portals. I just happened to open it up to it. I know the fan of portals.
These two, whoops, kind of backwards, two fit together.
They match up together.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of instances of things like that in the cards where they tell a bigger story than just what a traditional deck would tell.
Yeah, and some of that was an idea I took from I used to use for a long time the Witch's Tarot by Ellen Callan Reid.
That's Chelle's favorite.
Still use it to this day. Yeah,
that was my. I think I had that deck the longest, and it's finally mine is so worn out I can't even use it. There's
I got 3 copies, so I had to get.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a brilliant deck, and I had the original with it was borderless. I know they redid it with borders, and it was like
terrible. Mine doesn't have borders.
Good, because the bordered one looks awful, but the original one was so good, and I loved how a lot of times the moon or whatever planet would line up with another card up in the corner, and you could make different types of arrangements, and you just see the cards and the relationships between them differently, and that's what made me think, oh God, I need to do things like that, like take these cards and think about which ones actually I've had interesting relationships with, and then put those together in this deck so that other people pick up on that too, hopefully.
Now, I said earlier that gives a little bit of an oracle vibe to me, partly because a lot of the meanings are different. They're not exactly the same. There's so much different here.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I love that in someone's deck. It should be. It shouldn't be cookie cutter or something else.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, to this day, I have never owned a Rider-Waite deck.
Didn't you start out with the Thoth deck? Like, who would do that to themselves?
Worst freaking deck for a beginner. I didn't know any better. I knew who Aleister Crowley was as a teenager, and I'm like, oh, this is probably a good deck. Aleister Crowley.
I can trump you, Dave, because before I got that Witch's Tarot, I thought the Aquarian deck was the way to go.
Oh, the one that's in Italian? Yeah, I have that one too. Yeah, that one's real tough. I bought that one too. I'm like, oh, those are nice illustrations. And I'm like, I don't read Italian very well.
Yeah. Not the best introduction.
No.
And I love Pamela Coleman-Smith's art. I think she's brilliant. She did so much for tarot, but that kind of style, it doesn't really appeal to me too much. So I was like,
and I think that's what's made me a tarot collector. Because one secret I need to tell you is I have about 200 different decks. It's an obsession. I don't know if we'll call it an addiction or obsession, but
we'll call it
grows
both.
Every time I leave the house.
I have access to a spreadsheet, so I don't accidentally get her one that she already has.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. I've reached spreadsheet level. But what I like about this deck is I like the vibe is it's something about the blues and the purples. This is very blues and purples heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, I don't want to say it touches a deeper spiritual chord, but a little bit. And I don't know if it's the color combinations or my fascination with everything you've combined into this, because
she likes cryptids and ghost stories more than just about anything.
What I love more than that is UFOs. So this is like the everything I've ever wanted in a deck right here.
Nice. I'm glad. I like to hear
and
that.
For that, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, the deck palette was a little different for me, but it just seemed like it was the right kind of colors, like using a lot of cayenne reds and deep purples and a lot of deep sea greens and things like that, colors that aren't normally used in decks.
Before I unleash Layla on you, what made you, or what would make any person, and this is just an honest question, what made you pick the gilded edges?
I did not. That was Weiser's call.
Okay.
That was a surprise to me.
Okay.
Why?
They're not my favorite.
Oh,
I think they look pretty. They look beautiful. You look at it,
Initially.
it's gorgeous. But I am a user of decks. I am not a looker-adder of tarot decks. So I've been shuffling your deck, not even a lot, and the gilding already started to like bend and like flake. And,
oh.
it's pretty, it stands up okay. But from other gilded decks that I've had and just from using it for a couple days, if I heavily use this deck, those gilded edges are gonna look terrible.
And it's the curse of the gilded deck. It's not any deck in particular. It's we've talked about other gilded decks and the same thing. And I think that sometimes that I'm glad it wasn't your choice.
No, I didn't even know they were doing that.
It does look pretty. And I know people like the gilding, but I'm just going to tell you right now, listeners, it does have silver gilding and it looks beautiful. It goes great with the color of the deck. But like most gilding, you're going to want to be very careful how you shuffle, how often you shuffle, because the gilding tends to chip and flake and dent very, very easily. So your beautiful gilded edges, if you use this type of deck a lot, will show signs of wear pretty quickly. If you're using them for meditation or journal pulls, you don't have to worry about that quite so much. The back of the deck has a nice, you can't tell if it's reversed or not. I am a fan
That's
of,
important to me.
yeah, me too.
That was one thing I didn't like about the Witch's Tarot was you can always tell when the card's reversed.
Because the pentacle was either upright or it was upside down.
And it was slightly up above the center too.
Yep.
And the back of mine is actually, if you look really close, there's pieces from each of the
Each
four
suit, right? Yeah. And skulls. And yeah, this is
There's
great.
skulls, there's UFOs, there's the sticks are little pointy things sticking out.
Yeah. It's very simple, but also full of meaning, which I fully expect from someone with an illustration and chaos magic background.
That was my favorite part, was doing the back.
So as I was going through the major arcana, I did notice that they all have, I love that you have Indrid Cold in here. So freaking creepy. So creepy.
He's so creepy.
But I loved that you had the astrological stars on a lot of, not all of, but most of the major arcana. And it matches up with like the general, I know that there's a lot of different ideas, but there's a general idea of what sign goes with which.
When I was researching that, I realized how much tarot creators disagree on stars. And I went generally with what the old Golden Dawn did, because they seem to have the best and the most consistent approach to the astrology. And other readers I've spoken to have said the exact same thing. They're like, yeah, the Golden Dawn's the only ones that got it right. Everybody else just kind of guessed at it. And like there was a couple cards I saw that had 13 different constellations.
And I think it adds an extra depth to these cards that I really like. I have already picked a favorite card. It's Extraction, card number 12.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool one.
And honestly, other than the person being swept up by the UFO, the next thing that popped right out to me was those constellations. And that was really almost what my focus went on, almost like my focus kind of ignored the rest of the picture, so to say, and honed in just on that constellation I'm looking at.
I know a lot of people told me they immediately knew that was the Hangman card because they were like, he's in the position of the Hangman. I'm like, yes.
On purpose.
Yep.
I wanted to quick ask you, speaking of the UFO piece to this. I too, when I was in 9th grade, which was just a few minutes ago, when I was in 9th grade, most of my town saw 3 distinct UFOs, people calling the police. Similar story to you, people calling the local Army Reserve base.
Yep.
And basically all of us being told that we're not so cuckoo and that really didn't happen, even though a town of about 40,000 people saw it.
Right.
Did your experience seeing a UFO as a younger person, did that influence any of this suit of cards at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't same thing. Like when I was a little kid, I didn't know if there was aliens or not. But when I actually saw this thing, and then our entire neighborhood being told it's an advertising plane, and I'm like, planes don't hover unless you have a Harrier jump jet, and those things would have been blasting exhaust into our face, and we would have been burned. And also Harrier jump jets aren't round. They're triangular kind of.
Yeah.
We all saw this thing. It was not marked with there was no
No
military.
advertising.
Just yeah, it was just a set of lights that went around and that was it. Everything else was dark.
And I noticed that on the cards, they have little sets of lights that
Yeah.
go around.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was wondering, did that experience influence?
That and I also kind of wanted to pay an homage to the old 50s kind of look of flying saucers being like
Right.
and I used to work at the Los Alamos National Laboratory and we got to go down to Roswell a couple times and so I got
Probably
really
can't talk about any of that, can you?
I can't not a lot but
If he tells us, he'll have to take our tarot decks away.
no,
No.
take mine away. Yeah, no, we're the ones that go away.
That's not
Yeah,
funny. That's not funny.
No, yeah, you get erased.
You get disappeared.
You get disappeared. Yeah. I didn't work on anything big enough like that to worry about it, but it was kind of cool when I was there. They had just started the Human Genome Project,
Oh,
so that was kind of cool to see. And they were working on a particle accelerator and a lot of
Oh,
cool
wow.
stuff. It was neat. Yeah, it was a really neat experience. And working with these people that were so intelligent that they never even wrote their math out. It was just in their head.
wow.
Yeah, that's
All
it.
those complex things you always see on blackboards and pictures and stuff. It's like these guys just did in their head in seconds,
Damn.
and they're always like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, the math checks out." You're like, "Wait, no one got out a calculator."
So after lunch, did they take you down and show you the spaceship?
I tried so many times and so many ways to ask them, and they would just be real quiet for a second and kind of look down, and then change the subject. They
Don't
would
talk about it,
never
Dave.
respond with a yes or no. They would never deny or anything. They just changed something. Now there were things that they would deny, like if I asked about a certain thing that was not in my clearance level, they would just go, I can't go there. Which is
Gotcha.
kind of how we were told to talk about things. Like if someone asks you how was work today, you say it was great. I worked.
Gotcha.
But is
But they
that
would not.
code?
But that was one area they just were not funny about.
Not funny. Nope. No wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Just change the
And
subject.
But was
Yeah,
was any of that ever code for we have alien bodies in the basement?
oh, I know they did. They had something down there. I know they did.
Absolutely. We know they do. We know it.
Yeah,
The military has practically admitted it. We know.
yeah. I didn't get to see it, but they did. They have something. I know they did.
So you've experienced everything but a cryptid. Are you a cryptid hunter? Are you seeking out finding a cryptid? And if not, why not?
My theory is cryptids are genius loci.
Okay.
I
Okay.
can get
That
on
they
board
are
with that.
spiritual beings that appear and disappear and don't want to be seen by most people. And the people that don't want to see them and aren't expecting to see them are the ones that are going to see them.
Going along with that thought, apparently I'm from a weird place in upstate New York because we also had a stretch when I was probably in about 8th grade where for 2 weeks all around our town there was Bigfoot sightings for 2 weeks straight, which I'm from a region just a tad bit south of the Adirondack Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So it's plausible and near the Catskill Mountains as well. But for about 2 weeks straight, every single day in the news, there was Bigfoot sightings in the area. So do you think that some of these cryptids sometimes want to come out and be seen? Because how can a bunch of people see this
I
constantly?
think there's also, like group think of mass where a lot of times people just start getting caught up in it.
Like a hysteria?
They want to see it too. And they see a squirrel or a bear, and all of a sudden that's Bigfoot.
There is black bear from where I'm
black
from.
bears
It
for
could have been a
sure.
black
They
bear.
look so much like black bears.
And you are talking about an area of New York State where people regularly go hunting and shoot cows that they think are deer. So
Factual statements.
Wow.
Factual statements.
Yeah.
So it's possible they saw a squirrel and went, Bigfoot! No!
Yeah, the only thing that throws a wrench in that for me is up in parts of Michigan where they see the dog man. And I don't know if you read about that one, but these people say it's basically looks like a wolf, looks like a werewolf, and it has attacked people and animals. So there's people with literal bites out of them from this
Oh, wow.
thing. So that's what that one kind of throws me off, because I'm like, okay, there's something out there, whether it's a rabid wolf or because we do have wolves in Michigan, whether it's that or if there actually is something strange out there. But so many people have seen it, and they're very, very specific about their descriptions and real consistent. The only ones I don't believe is when people tell me it had glowing eyes. Because I'm like, eyes don't emit light.
Wow.
If they did, you'd be blind.
Maybe they just see the reflection from the
Yeah, and if
tapetum
they
and
said
then
that would be one thing. If they said its eyes were reflecting like a dog's, I'd go, okay. A lot of the dogman people, that's what they said. They said their eyes were pink like a dog's.
That doesn't sound as cool though.
But I don't hear it. But other people are like, it was glowing red eyes. Oh, all
But that
right.
sounds better. They get
Yeah,
more,
it does
they
sound
get to
better, but
more
I just
dramatic
also like
effect.
lay off the Jack Daniels, okay?
Travel Channel, call us, send the three of us. We'll go cryptid hunting across the country.
Right?
We'll bring a healthy dose of skepticism and all the tools we can muster, and we'll see if we can find them. So
I'm not leaving Massachusetts till I find that puckwudgie, man.
That's got to be on the list. All right.
Puckwudgie.
That's a good one.
Right next to my Wampus cat.
There you go. He's right up there. So I do have, okay, we're going to get serious for a second because I have a terrible complaint about your deck.
Okay.
One of my favorite myths, legends, ghost stories are all of the Lady in White stories across the whole country. Love them. I love the lore behind them. I love the truth in the legends. I'm just absolutely fascinated with those ghost stories in particular. And one of the most famous, maybe the originator of Lady in White stories is La Llorona.
I knew you were going to mention that card.
And yeah, she is this is like a cautionary tale. This is a woman who her husband or her lover took another lover, and in a fit of madness and rage, she drowned their children and then realized what she had done, came to her senses, and either killed herself or either way spent eternity trying to find her children and make up for this. How did you come up with her as the Empress? Because those two things seem completely opposite.
She kept popping up to me every time I looked for something else.
She wanted to be the Empress, is what
She wanted to.
She did. And I was like, that was the only card where I had like a spirit literally like insisting they be in the deck and which card it was. And
that kind of makes sense.
Okay, then. Because I really wanted to do some of those English white ladies or gray ladies that made a little more sense. And I also thought about some of the spiritual, like enlightened master kind of people that would have been better for an Empress. But that one, she just was, I'm like, okay.
Wow.
You want this card? I'm like, I'll put you in.
Never argue with an insistent woman.
No, not La Llorona, especially. But no, the Empress is more like that nurturing, fulfilling, maybe who she was in life, you know?
Yeah, but there are a lot of tales of her where she protects other people's children. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's true. And sometimes people do call upon La Llorona to protect children. But I don't know how common that is. So I don't know. I'm not really sure if I can buy La Llorona as the Empress. I mean, that's okay. It's all right to re-envision these cards to have different meanings. And the meaning for La Llorona does not have to match the Empress just because she's in that Empress position. I mean, La Llorona, she's the wailing woman, and she's, in some legends, she's out to kill other people's children, to take them for her own. Right. So it's very difficult to see it as an Empress card replacement, but as its own card, as its own thing, I can see it as that. So I can see that. I can get into that.
And I also saw one version of the tale where she was blamed for the murder of the children, and she didn't do it.
Yeah, it's certainly a tale of a mother who's grieving so hard for her children that she's walking the earth forever looking for them. So I can see that a little bit. It's still a little bit of a difficult one for me to see as the Empress, but if I see her as the card La Llorona in your deck, it makes perfect sense. She fits in beautifully with the description. I don't know how she would feel about threesomes, but I suppose that could be part of it.
Pulling in one little bit of traditional in there, yeah. But
so if I do have to separate her a little bit from the traditional idea of the Empress in the deck and look a little bit beyond that. Like some of the other cards in your deck have different stories to tell.
Yeah, like the Lover's card, you cannot. We had such a different approach on that I was like, all right, this is going to throw people off a lot, but that's too bad.
And that's okay. And that's why we go to different types of decks, to get someone else's viewpoint and opinion and different angle on this card. So But that's a little bit why I said I have a hard time looking at it as like a traditional tarot deck, because some of
It's
the
not.
cards, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
That's what, when I pick decks to read for myself or to do like tarot journaling, I like to pick decks that have non-traditional imagery and non-traditional meanings, because I am so steeped in the Rider Waite Smith, idea of what they are, that this really helps me tap into a different part of my magical self, my subconscious.
Mhm.
So I really love your deck for that, but I definitely could not call it a traditional deck. That's not
No,
an
I don't
insult, but that's
traditional deck at all. This is one of my friends locally, and he is also really into cryptids, really into ghosts, and he has a podcast too. So Chris, he actually came up with a lot of the ideas while we were talking over beer. And one of the ideas he had that I loved was the lover's card, that he said, what if instead of two people, you had two spirits in one body? And I said, oh, that'd be cool. He goes, maybe it's a skin changer, maybe it's like some kind of shape-shifting thing. And
Mhm.
I'm like, that's a great idea. So we thought of using the starts with skin and ends with W, and I won't say the rest of the word because I got when I was posting these to Instagram every night, I got a nice little comment from someone that said no. And I DM'd the person back, and it turned out he was a part of Navajo Nation. And he said, I said, did I get the details wrong? He goes, no, no, they're very good. Please do not call that energy up on us or on you. You will regret it. So just please find a different, safer shapeshifter. We thought, okay, well, the Irish puka is pretty safe. But same thing, the puka can appear as a woman, as a rabbit, as a horse that takes you off on a ride, or all kinds of things. So
Can offer choices. It's a can be a trickster, can be I love that card. I think that's
which
a great card.
in relationships can be all those things too. You don't know what
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get.
I think this deck is fantastic for that. Not only does it scratch the itch of all these different paranormal and fantastic events, that Shell and I are fascinated with anyway, it's fun, but it also has very serious, very solid, very good tarot background in it.
Thanks.
Some of it reimagined, which I
Mhm.
absolutely adore.
That's the point of why we want more than Rider Waite Smith decks, is because we want these things reimagined. I want to see the Yeti as the hermit. These are why we as a people, me as a obsessive, addictive, collected tarot collector, this is why I always am seeking out a bigger, badder, better deck, because I don't want every single hermit card to mean exactly the same thing every time. This strikes a different chord to me
Right.
as the cryptid lover than the hermit card is going to. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And also, when I look at the Rider Waite deck, I see a lot of very gender typical roles too, which I don't think apply to society right now.
Right.
Correct.
A lot of those things I tried to like eliminate or make them throw, because I feel bad for people who don't see themselves in those cards, when everything is done as a very, very old fashioned binary relationship type
We don't
thing.
live in the Rider Waite world anymore.
No, no, and that's one thing I have a big problem with. So I was like, well, I can make my cards a little more fluid,
And
and they
and
should.
and much like you, I've been reading cards for 30 years. I didn't buy a Rider Waite version until within the last 5 or so years,
Oh
because
wow.
I don't know. I was one of those, that's too basic. But
Hmm.
when I got my hands on that Ellen Cannon Reed Witches Tarot, that spoke to me in a way that Rider Waite didn't. And this speaks to me in a way that Rider Waite doesn't. I like that it's different. That's 110% of the reason why I like it, is because it's not like every other damn deck you're gonna get.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that a lot, actually. Yeah, I didn't want to be like everybody else, because I mean, I have a stellium and Aquarius. There's no way I want to be like everybody
And
else.
I would also like to just quickly mention, we are giving you tons of credit and tons of kudos here. I have an unsung hero that I would like to thank and give a shout out to, and that is your wife for pushing you to do this.
Who made me.
So kudos to your wife. Tell her I thank her, because it was worth the year wait.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, she's great. It was funny too, because she's like a real grounded atheist and doesn't, this is all woo-woo stuff to her. So, but she actually a lot of times would give me some of the best ideas for the deck.
And if nothing else, she gave you the confidence and the push and the drive and the okay to take the 2 years and do it. And it was so worth it.
Yeah, I don't know if when people say like, oh, I'm going to do a deck someday, I'm like, do you really have any idea how long that takes? Like, I spent 900 hours of drawing, 200 hours writing, and that doesn't count edits, that doesn't count revisions, that doesn't count research time, which was God knows how many times I read and
figuring out how to cut up that Bigfoot painting.
how many I was so lucky that year in during COVID, Hulu Plus had so many cryptid and UFO and ghost shows on. I just watching all of them while I was drawing, and I'm like,
shush, I'm studying. Shush, I'm studying.
Basically, yeah. I'm sure it drove my rest of my family nuts to see that.
Mm-hmm. Before you came on here, Chelle and I were talking, and I did the math and realized that we started the Stoned Witches Hour paranormal show right around the same time.
We started this deck.
So I told Chelle, you obviously made this for her. You must have been channeling Chelle.
He's like, there's some crazy girl from New York who really has to have this deck or she'll die.
And I think what's good about it is it's a blend of old and new, because there are traditional symbols and ideas in here. There's importance in the archetypes and in, having things be as close as possible to what people know is true, because that activates part of our brain, that activates that whole thing where we're all seeing the same images in these
repetitive recollection.
But at the same time, it also has enough new vision to keep you interested. So it's a very good blending of old ideas, old archetypes, and what you're going to be familiar enough with as a regular tarot reader with this deck to be able to pick it up and read it without even having to know the supernatural side of all of it. But you'll get so much more out of it if you go into these legends, if you go into the cards and the art themselves and see beyond the traditional. So that's going to give you a lot of good magical insight. I'm not surprised that an atheist helped you with this, because you don't have to believe in magic or any of that to use tarot. Tarot is an amazing mental health journey aid.
I think it's first and foremost a psychological tool, and secondly, it's divination.
Absolutely.
Another card, kind of, if we did another extension thing of this, I would love to do creatures and spirits from Africa, because they never get mentioned. There's so many of them. And what I've learned just from being in Santeria and Palomeombe and seeing there's a whole range of spirits that regular European witchcraft doesn't encounter and doesn't see, and that we get to see. And I see all of them now. And it's just some of them are just so strange and hard to comprehend from a Western viewpoint. And you really have to change your brain a little to understand things from the African point of view, of where everything's community first.
To see from a different way, that's magic. And you're absolutely right. A lot of our magic and our traditions and folklore is heavily, European influence. And so to have ideas from other parts of the world with the same land spirits are land spirits all over the world. Every culture has some type of idea of these energies. And so to talk about all of them, there's a lot of power in that. I would love it if you did a companion deck.
We're giving this guy like the next 5 years of work here. He's got to do an expansion. He's got to do another deck. But I think that this is a kick-ass deck. And if you vibe this motif and are a tarot reader, you will be able to easily use this deck.
And I might bitch about the gilding, but it's very pretty.
My only complaint about the gilding, this is a funny story. So I took these to my mundane work, and I was shuffling them at work, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to check these out. And, work lights, the way the lights shined on them and the way I had the cards angled, I thought for a second I burned my retina.
Yeah, it's like chrome.
It is
like chrome. It is mirror-like finish.
We haven't even touched on spreads that you like. I know you have a book about AI magic or people who use AI magic coming up in the fall. We haven't even gone there.
I was going to say, we might just have to have them back.
Okay. I would love that.
Certainly if you do an expansion pack, and if anybody out there has his original deck, email us. We want it.
I can send you guys. I'll send you guys. So I still have some. So.
Oh, wow.
That would be like Christmas and Yule and my
Yeah.
birthday all together.
Yeah, they're different enough that it's worth seeing the difference, you know.
That would be very cool. And
Yeah,
and
What
an
was your
expansion.
favorite out of it, out of this one?
Well, I'm definitely a fan of your art. Like I said, I followed you for a minute on some of your socials, and not just this deck, but your other art is beautiful. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I have Davezilla and Davezilla Media. If it's Davezilla Media, that's gonna be where this can be more art.
Okay.
On Threads, I tend to post a lot more discussions about magic and things like that. So if you really want to know, like, learn spells from me or learn what I'm reading about or thinking about, that's like a really good place to follow me. And
Yeah.
If people want to purchase your deck directly from you, can they get that at davezilla.com?
no, Hex Support.
Okay.
Hexsupport.club is my site for books and decks and stuff.
The Tarot of the Unexplained comes out early August, right? So pretty soon, August 5th, so you can get your copy.
Layla, you forgot the tagline of this deck, which is such a Gen X thing for us. This is the deck that Fox Mulder would have used.
Yeah, that was one of my taglines. My other tagline is "Weird times call for weird tools."
Hell
Yes!
yeah.
Be
Hell
weird.
yeah.
Embrace the weird. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being on.
Thanks for having me. Great.
We're definitely going to try to bug you to be back on because I have
Oh,
so
I'd
many
love
more
to.
questions.
It's so fun.
Chaos
Yeah.
magic, more tarot, more things. Let's talk.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Huge thank you to Davezilla and to Red Wheel Wiser for the Tarot of the Unexplained, coming out August 5th, wherever you buy your tarot decks. Thank you so much for listening to Back on the Broomstick. We'll see you next week. Be wise, be wicked, and keep it witchy.